All right, guys, welcome to another video. So today, Steven the third came out. I think that's how you pronounce him. We're not sure if he's actually going to be on the wheel or MGE, or it's kind of weird, right? Because they both technically are open fielding commanders. So maybe they're both. I have no idea. But regardless, there. I did hear a rumor that there was going to be like a third range commander, but that is not typical. So until we see it happen, I'm just going to assume this is it for the ninth generation, right? So we'll talk about Steven real quick, but more importantly, I think I want to talk about this whole ninth generation. So starting with Belisarius Prime, which the hype was through the roof, and Belisarius actually probably got the most hate out of any of these ninth generations. Then you move on to William Wallace, right? And then you have Shajar, and then finally you have Philip and Stephen, all right? And I think the general summary of the ninth generation is that these commanders aren't bad. They're good, right? But they're definitely not the best of that troop type, right? So like you think Shajar does not make the top troop type, like no matter how much you like her. And then it's debatable whether they're that much of an upgrade as far as the second march, right? Even if it is, it's not that big of an upgrade. So if you already have the top four commanders, say in a troop type, and then the ninth generation comes out, you're not that far ahead on gold heads. From an investment standpoint, it's just a skip because it's an opportunity to get further ahead. Even if you did upgrade the commander, it's like a minimum upgrade. And then it's very likely that in the next generation, there's a good chance that commander gets replaced. Right now, if you start thinking back to like the 8th, 7th, and 6th generation, right, Nevsky, I think actually came out in the 6th generation. Don't quote me on that. And he's actually still part of the best marks in the game right now, right? So that's a commander that has lasted through multiple generations because the kid is that good. And in general, when you're thinking about what makes a commander viable long term, right, there's like four parts to it. One, you have a decent AoE damage factor, right? Because you have a decent AoE, as you can tell, like through the generations, you're not always going to get the AoE. So if you have a decent AoE, it's more likely that commander is going to stick around. Does that commander have march speed? If the commander doesn't have march speed, the parrying starts becoming an issue, right? So like ZL, as good as he is, because he doesn't have march speed, all of a sudden, like most players, once they get to a certain point, they're scrambling to update the boost to level 4 or level 5. They're trying to figure out how to pair him with another commander that has march speed and make him more viable. Or else, like, ideally, you could just run ZL YSG on the field, right? And that thing should just pump out a lot of damage. But for anyone that has used it outside of a Orleans KVK, I think more often than not, people find that even though that march is supposed to do really, really well, because it's so slow, there's just times when it gets to a bad position and it just gets wiped out, or it's just too slow to actually connect to a target to do the damage that it just doesn't seem to do as well as it should, right? So AoE, march speed. The third one is there some kind of useful debuff, right? So if there's a useful debuff that's bringing a lot of value or buff onto the field, then it's way more likely to survive. And then the fourth one is do they actually have like a unique role, right? So right now, if you look at Cavs, Belisarius Prime, Huo, and Nevsky all occupy the same role right now, right? They're single target commanders that their role is to essentially amplify skill damage, right? So all three of them add a degree of skill damage, and what they're really looking for is an AoE pairing to go along with them, right? So if you don't have the AoE pairing to go along with them, and then you're running two single target, it's not going to work so well. That's why you can see like AoE compare with single target or AoE, but if you just have a single target damage commander, right, the choices for pairing become a lot more limited, and then it becomes less likely that they survive through the subsequent cycles. All right, so having said all of that, Steven kind of fits into the ninth generation model. I think he's good, but anyone who's used Siege before, you should know like the holy grail of how to get the best reports and do the most damage with a Siege is to be able to set up in a place where you're only taking counterattack damage back, your Siege can continuously fire, and then just launch an active skill. Yes, it would be great if you could do a little bit more damage, where Steven does more damage, I think a little bit more damage than Gajimata, right? If you're just comparing 1-on-1. But Gajimata is way tankier, and Gajimata has more healing. And that's very important because if you guys know anything about the basic game mechanics, right? The more troops you have, the higher your damage is going to be. As you lose troops, your damage is going to go down. So if you're tanky and you can actually heal and sustain for a long time on the field, that's when you can actually do the maximum damage of a siege, especially if you're running a siege in a field march. ideally you could just set up the siege somewhere and just let it auto fire while you're controlling the field march and let it do its thing, right? So if you're going to give me the option, even if Gajamada wasn't in the dailies and he was just like another commander that you have to spin the wheel, right? I would choose Gajamada Cordoba over Steven Cordoba, just because of that tankiness and that healing factor. So Steven, for all intents and purposes, goes in the second best range march, right? I think you would probably run at Margaret and Steven in that order. You could probably flip it around and try it out and see how it goes. But regardless, Margaret and Steven both have healing. It'll still do well, right? But it just, most people aren't running two siege marches because they're not being a siege main, right? So if you're just running one siege march, and especially if you're spending enough to buy Gajamon and Maja in the dailies, I think it's a no-brainer. This commander is a skip, okay? And that kind of falls in line with all these other 9th generation commanders. So some thoughts on the 9th generation, right? So that's Billy Prime, William Wallace, Shajar, Philip, and then Stephen. They all kind of fall in the same category that I covered earlier, right? Good enough to be a second march, maybe, but because they're not clearly in the top march, their viability when the next generation comes out will come into question, right? So, like for example, if you're looking at running the best infantry march and having one commander for when the next infantry commander comes out, right? It's clear cut for I think most people. You want to go with Luchet, right? Like no matter what commander comes out, you could probably pair that commander with Luchet and it'll at least be a really, really good march, right? So that's like the ideal, right? Whereas if you have a commander that goes in the second march, so if you take a commander, say like Shajar right now, where honestly with the release of Philip, I think Shajar is already dead in the water. It was actually really, really unfortunate. They did her real dirty, right? But if you have a commander like Shajar, and before Philip came out, you're like, okay, well maybe I'm going to try to run Asher Benepal Shajar as my second Archer March, and then my primary will be Ziel Herman. Well, if any Archer March comes out, who's likely going to get the axe, right? Now, Lilith can do some kind of crazy thing with true damage, and maybe Asher Benepal will get the axe, and that new commander will pair with Shajar. But we're just thinking, like, out of all the possible scenarios, Shajar is probably the first one to go, right? So if I had to give like an overview of this 9th generation, I think it was really beneficial for people that had already been playing for a while. So your marches are pretty much done, right? You have 5, 6, 7 marches with 4 marches, whatever you're doing, that's your plan, and you already had those marches fill out. The 9th generation, you literally could have skipped every commander and got ahead on gold heads, right? If you were a new player coming into the 9th generation, I think those are the people that probably struggle the hardest, just because now you have a choice to make, right? Do you invest in a newer commander and then have that commander potentially get cycled out in the next generation? Or do you actually start backwards investing into older commanders because they're better, right? And it just doesn't feel as good when you're investing in a commander that's 2 years old, where a new commander can come out and possibly replace him as well. Whereas like if it's a new commander and you know that commander is going to be good, it just feels a lot safer. It's just a better feeling to invest in that commander, right? And that's essentially the 9th generation. So right now, as of this moment, right, we're done with the 9th generation. It's widely assumed that the next cycle is going to be Cavs. How do you want to go about this? I think with Cav right now, the best Cav march is going to be Nevsky and Joan. Out of the two, I think Joan has the most survivability just because AoE is at a premium with Cavs right now. So even if they release a AoE Cav commander that doesn't increase skill damage, so you're not going to pair that commander with Joan, right? Like this new commander, that new commander at worst will push Joan to the second march, but not completely move her out of the second march. Whereas if you think about Nevsky, Hua, and Belly, right? If I had to actually rank the 3 as a standalone by themselves, I would probably take Nevsky first, Belly second, and then Hua third, right? But they're all occupying the same role, and there could easily be like a single target skill damage increase Cav commander that's going to push one of them out, right? I personally, it will probably be Hua, but like if I had Belly or Nevsky, I wouldn't feel quite as safe as if I was just picking Joan as far as surviving, right? When it comes to Archer, it's pretty clear cut, right? You have ZL and Herman. So if you are just getting to season 3, right, you can invest in either or both of those. knowing for sure that like you'll be able to use them as part of the best Archer March in the next cycle. I'm not sure which one I would actually prioritize. I think Herman is more well-rounded, right? I think ZL has potential to be better. He just has higher upside, but his complete lack of march speed makes it where there's certain commanders that you just can't pair him with. Whereas like you're going to be able to pair Herman with any Archer commander that comes out, right? So personally, if I was going to pick one to invest in first, it would be Herman. But I do think ZO has a lot higher upside, and there's more potential that ZL and a new Archer commander will be part of the best march in the game, right? But Shajar just came out. We have a while before we have to worry about that. Right now, for the foreseeable future, ZL Herman is going to be the best Archer march. Now, when it comes to infantry, it's kind of crazy because clearly you have Luce, right? And then all of a sudden, with Luce, you compare Ragnar with him, you compare Scipio with him, you compare William Wallace with him, you compare Alex with him. Right, I mean, like even the new commander that hasn't come out, the leadership commander Philip, Luce Philip will actually probably do really well, right? Because you just compare the kit of Alex and Philip side by side. If Alex Luce is or Luce Alex is training really well, there's strong reason to believe that Luce Philip could trade even better. It probably won't bring as much as far as utility on the field because Alex's debuff is really good, but Philip still brings some really good buffs to your side on the field as well, right? So when it comes to infantry, I think the way to go is just definitely invest in Luce, and in the meantime, just kind of have a placeholder until you figure out what the next infantry is going to be, because these cycles come around fairly quick, and if you invest in any of these commanders right now, there's a good chance, any of these second commanders right now, there's a good chance that they're not going to make the cut on the next one, right? Out of Ragnar, Scipio, William Wallace, I think the one that's clearly on the chopping block would actually be William Wallace, because he only pairs well with Luce right now. And if a new commander comes out that pairs better with Luce, then all of a sudden you don't really have a place for your William Wallace, right? So thinking back on this whole 9th generation, it's actually funny because Belisarius got the most hate, but I can actually make an argument that out of the field commanders, Belly Prime out of all the 9th generations might be the best. I've said this multiple times before. His expertise is very underrated good. As soon as you connect to the target, if you have 5 targets surrounding it, it's an instant 12% more damage. You don't have like Alex where it triggers for 3 seconds and you need to launch it after skill again. It's as soon as you make contact and you surround. So basically any target that gets out of position, Belly's super fast, you touch it, other marches surrounding it, it's going to melt a lot faster, right? That's something that there's nothing else that can replace that right now. That's just a very valuable skill, right? If I had to actually pick the second best commander in this 9th generation cycle, I think I would actually probably have to go with Philip without seeing him in action, just because you know he'll at least be a very versatile secondary, and right, he could pair as an archer, he could pair as an infantry, right? He could pair behind Luce, he could pair behind a cab if you want. It's like there's obviously certain troop types that work better. I think he probably works best as an archer right now, but he's so versatile that if you do end up planning on running 3 marches of troop type in the future, Philip will definitely make that possible, but he actually will probably stick around and be good enough to be the second commander of the second best march in a troop type for a while, right? So that's actually funny how that kind of worked out. That Belly probably got the most hate, but out of all the commanders, Belly or Philip are probably the most survivable, whereas William Wallace and Shajar probably will actually get weeded out the fastest. It actually kind of reminds me of like Tariq when he came out, right? He was good, and if you invest in him, he would have been an upgrade to your field march. And a lot of people were using him like a year ago, right? But all of a sudden, no one's using him a year later, right? So you got faded out really quick. Whereas like you have someone like Nevsky, right? He's just still all over the field. He's good. So yes, you can have a commander that's an upgrade. You can have a commander that's good. But a lot of times when you're investing, you actually also want to take into account the longevity of that commander. All right. And then finally, out of this whole 9th generation, by far, in my opinion, the best commander is actually Choe, the garrison commander. If you guys have not seen this, seen Choe in action, I've seen Hera Cho. I haven't seen Daido Cho, which I heard is even better. This commander is disgusting as a garrison commander, whether it's city or just on the field. Uh, he probably doesn't trade as well, but probably slightly worse than say like a Gorgo garrison in overall. But he's very, very tanky, and the best part about him is he's almost unswarmable. Like as soon as you try to swarm him, right, this expertise over here, uh, the amount of counterattack damage he's dealing is through the roof. That just seeing him in action, you know, from our side and other people have used him, he's someone that is like on my radar. Like you know, I'm buying dailies for Heraclius right now. Right? I actually thought of just going Lapu Lapu just to you know kind of have like a double leadership universal garrison commander, but I think I'm just gonna eventually move into Choe and then just have Hera Choe on my wall, right? Like I don't plan on garrisoning, but you know, if you play in KVK where you know the possibility is there for you to random TP around and stuff, having Hera Choe on your wall, like you can 100% feel safe. And I can't emphasize enough like how good this commander is, because if you don't swarm him, even though he might not trade as well, he's very, very survivable. That just the rally is going to take a long time to take him down. And as you know anything, right? Like rally garrison, like you want field and you want to take him down, but like if it takes a long time to take him down, it's easy for people to fill it with farms and stuff, and he's just a problem, right? Because you have to swarm, and if you swarm, the counterattack damage goes through the roof. And even though he might not trade as well as say like the best Gorgo garrison, he still trades more than good enough, and it takes a long time to take down. And like he is in this generation, in my opinion, the best commander to come out in this generation. And I think he's going to be survivable for a long, long time because of the unique attributes he brings. All right, so started out talking about Steven, talked about the ninth generation. You know, just kind of like a rant. Hopefully, provided some insight just into like my thinking on this. Oh, and one final thing. I do think that because this whole ninth generation decided to not power creep the previous generation, so right, so they're very, very close to like the second tier commanders of the troop type. I think you're going to start going into an era where running 3 marches of a troop type is going to be viable again. Right? We just had a lot of that changed the debuff for the city skins, so now city skins benefiting a troop type has a lot more upside. Obviously, a universal city skin will be better, but like if you have commanders that are not really power creeping the other ones out, all of a sudden you could go to the 3rd march of a troop type, and it'll still keep up with the 2nd march of a troop type and do pretty well, right? Like whether it's cav, archer, or infantry, you start thinking about all these commander combinations you could do, especially once you throw Philip in there. Whether you're looking at going the 3rd march of a troop type for your 7th march or even before, at this point it's going to be more viable than ever because they didn't really power creep this 9th generation. So that's kind of my all thoughts on this 9th generation on Steven. If you watch all the way to the end yet, you haven't, please like and subscribe. And thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you guys next time.